Welcome on behalf of the Church Urban Fund to this webinar considering how the Church tackles poverty. I'm Lynn Collins, Bishop of Barking, a Churchworks Commissioner and the Church of England Lead Bishop for Estates Evangelism. I'm going to be chairing this evening's session. Our theme this evening grows out of a motion passed just 2 weeks ago by the General Synod of the Church of England. The debate opened up an honest and urgent conversation about the reality of poverty in the UK, the Church's calling to respond, and the practical and prophetic role both national structures and local churches can play in working towards its end. Many of the contributions were deeply moving. They were rooted in lived experience of the hardship faced by individuals and families, but also of the remarkable ways churches and community groups are already serving their neighbours with compassion and with creativity. There was a clear and heartfelt message running through the debate that this is a moment for action as well as words. So this evening, we're going to hear from 3 people who were involved in the debate. Bishop Rob Wickham, as CEO of the Church Urban Fund, Will Fremont Brown, Policy Advisor on Economics and Social Welfare for the Church of England, and Reverend Alex Frost, Vicar of St Matthew's, Burnley, and member of General Synod. After each of them has spoken, we'll move to a time of discussion followed by Q&A. But before we move to our speakers, we're going to hear from Colin, who shared his story with Cuff. In this clip, he describes how, following a period of homelessness, a local church not only met some of his practical needs, but also enabled him to build meaningful relationships and growing confidence through volunteering.
It's an almighty shock to the system when you are made homeless. Because there were plenty of time I had bread while I was in the tent and I'd come back and it'd be all be gone because the rats were there. 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock in the night in the winter and it's dark, you've just got to go and bunker down. But this place, I was made to feel very welcome. And so I come here if I can every week and I just suddenly started volunteering. It made me feel warm and, it's like these people were so kind to me. What's harm in doing the washing the pots? It's helping. It's not a lot, but every little helps. But now that's progressed. I'm now chopping vegetables and I'm not cooking yet. I'm not going to kill people with my cooking.
Colin's story and the story of others demonstrate that in seeking to move out of poverty, many people will need support to address the complex web of challenges that they encounter. This evening, we'll hear about the role that the Church can and perhaps even should take in enabling this and why its voice is important. So, Bishop Rob, why does the Church need to speak about poverty?
Well, thank you, Bishop Lynn, for that introduction. And it's wonderful to hear Colin's story. I've got 4 reasons why the Church should get engaged with this work. Firstly, there's something about our authenticity, the fact that we've already got feet on the ground. I'm aware that this isn't just across the Church of England, but the House of Good reports from National Churches Trust reminds us that the contribution of Christians in terms of this work of reshaping community comes to the tune of £55 billion a year. And government figures alone state that about 17% of the population volunteer regularly. But when you think of the Christian contribution, it's well in its 20% and further in terms of contribution. So people of faith are more likely to contribute to their local communities. Across the board, of course, since COVID, the numbers of people volunteering has plummeted, less likely to have plummeted, of course, within the church congregations. We know that 98% of food banks received support from churches. We know that 2,000 Church of England churches are engaged in some kind of night shelter work. And given this grassroots work that's taking place, churches therefore have an imperative to speak out. To not do so would be silencing the very stories of those amongst whom we are serving. Secondly, there's something about the needs around us. Do you know, according to the Joseph Rowntree Foundation latest poverty report, 1 in 5 people are living in poverty. That's 14.2 million people in this country. 4.5 million of those are children. 8 million of those are working age adults. 2 million are pensioners. It's extraordinary figures. When you come across, particularly from an ethnicity perspective, 49% of the Pakistani population are living in poverty, 53% of the Bangladeshi population. Poverty is linked, as we know, also to disability and within the family and mental health, all sorts of issues having a big effect upon people's lives. And this, of course, is a matter of life and death. The difference between someone living in a posh part of central London and out in Blackpool, which, of course, is the most deprived community, most deprived parish that we have across the Church of England, for a man can be 25 years length of life. This is a matter of life and death. Thirdly, there's a biblical and ecclesial rootedness in terms of the importance of this work. We talk about the incarnation, the fact that God so loved the world that he pitched his tent amongst us. The word was made flesh and dwelt among us. There's about placedness, there's about being amongst people. We know from the earliest Bible stories, in terms of Cain and Abel, the big question that was given to God was, am I my brother's keeper? Am I my sibling's keeper? We know to the question of who is my neighbor, Jesus gives us the picture of the Good Samaritan, which turns the world order upside down. And ultimately, in the cross, we find the ultimate symbol, not of deficit, but of abundance and generosity. The word parish itself means, its very definition, outside the house. So parish churches' roles are not about just increasing numbers, but they are about serving the local. It's in its very definition about what does it mean to be a parish church. And we know also there's the important framework of the 5 marks of mission, which is about proclaiming the good news of the kingdom, to teach, baptize, and nurture new believers. It's also about responding to human need by loving service and to transform the unjust structures of society, to challenge violence of every kind and pursue peace and reconciliation, as well as looking after and safeguarding the integrity of creation. Extraordinary impact that we have. We also recognize in many ways that churches are rooted in the midst of local communities. That makes it place-based. We know that that idea is being taken by government and others in the Pride in Place program, which is currently being rolled out across the country. There's something about real people interacting with a real place. And certainly in many ways, this can be informed by the whole asset-based community development approach, which recognizes people, buildings, the stuff that makes up communities as really important assets, blessings, places, opportunities of abundance, which speak about the life that God gives to local communities, as it were, places at its heart. We see this time and time again in the scriptures, where in the scriptures, places are mentioned, where people are, where people are going. The place is important, and churches are place-based, which enables local community partnerships to be able to respond to poverty locally. We think in the Together Network, which serves the whole country, about national movement and local action, shaping those relationships. Now, this is all very well, of course, but we do have some challenges to face. How well we might do this work, and I hope that this will come out through the question and answers that we have in a few moments' time. But is the way we're organized with our competitive model, particularly around funding, where we think of competitor analysis in terms of who's doing what, rather than seeing each other as friends, is that something that's helpful for us? Is the way we do legislation, as in a debating chamber, is that helpful to us? The way we're encouraged to think about our impact and around perhaps a lack of impact assessments and the way in which we are able to use data. Is there a better way we can do this, particularly as we serve areas of poverty? Should money purely be geared primarily towards church growth, or are there other ways in which we're able to shape the world, shape our communities as God intends them to be? And finally, is there a deep sort of sense that in our parish church network primarily, that we truly believe that ministry is about what takes place outside the house as opposed to inside the house? I look forward to the rest of the conversations this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. So thank you, Rob. We're now going to hear from Will Fremont Brown, Economics and Social Welfare Policy Advisor for the Church of England, who helped draft the motion that Synod debated. So, Will, we've heard from Rob that the Church needs to speak into this issue, but what does that look like at a national level?
Thanks, Bishop Lynn, and evening, everyone. It's really good to be with you all. I think I'm going to pick up where Bishop Rob left off in many ways, because I think in terms of our engagement with this, that what we do as an institution is really important, and how we speak as a national institution with a voice in the public square is really important. But I think I want to say that we need to step back and affirm again what churches are doing in their communities, because we know that every day, all over the country, churches are stepping up and serving, and doing that very often at the edge of their own capacity to love God, and to love their neighbor by meeting needs through service. And whether it's food banks or warm hubs or activity group, the list is long, and the impact is huge. And I've been reflecting around the Synod motion, around the legacy of faith in the city, and the report which where we mark the anniversary this at this Synod of 40 years, and reflecting on the fact that a number of the challenges that report identified are still very relevant today. The report said that a substantial minority of people are forced to live on the margins of poverty, and apart from a short period in the late 1990s, early 2000s, there hadn't been a significant reversal of the overall poverty trends that took root around the time Faith in the City was written. But what we have, as we did then, and as we have always had, is a conviction that poverty isn't inevitable, it's not acceptable. And that in the spirit of Faith in the City, we should have a real confidence in the role that the church can play in making a real difference, and drawing on local insights is absolutely essential to doing that. But as Bishop Rob hinted at, the challenges faced by public services and voluntary organisations means that the pressure on churches has grown considerably. And so I think increasingly, as we are relied on to fill gaps and meet needs, I think it's reasonable for us to ask why those needs exist in the first place. And so that's where the relationship between churches and what churches are doing on the ground in communities, and our national contributions in the public square, that relationship becomes absolutely vital. And the 26 bishops who sit in the House of Lords do what all members of the House of Lords do. They ask questions of government ministers, they table amendments and vote on legislation, and take part in debates. But they do so bringing with them the insight of what they experience in the communities that they live among and serve. And of course, bishops all have their own interests and bring their own areas of expertise. But in Parliament, they all engage on issues of poverty in one way or another. And for the best part of a decade, bishops have been right at the forefront of calling for an end to the 2-child limit. There's a practical element to that, because we saw in our churches and in our communities and in our schools what the statistics bore out, which is that denying financial support to low-income families was a significant driver of poverty. But there's a moral case to that as well, that children made in the image of God, precious in his sight, shouldn't be denied support that restricts their health and their well-being and life chances. So as the government developed its child poverty strategy last year, bishops in the House of Lords got busy. They gave speeches, they met with government ministers, they worked with charities and other faith leaders. The Bishop of Derby hosted the Work and Pensions Lords Minister and some of her colleagues to see what the church was doing in action in her diocese. And so the minister had the chance to see that work in action, to have conversations with people who were affected by the structural barriers that cause and entrench poverty. And it's a great thing that after years of campaigning with others, the 2-child limit will be removed from April. And as a result, hundreds of thousands of children will be lifted out of poverty. I think it speaks to the fact that it makes a difference when the church can draw on its practice and its insights and bring them into a place where political decisions are made. I want to finish by reflecting briefly on a shift at this synod, which I think is very important, because both in this debate and in the debate about social care, there was an affirmation of the need to draw on the views and voices and experiences of people who are most affected by those issues. And I think especially when the need is great, there's a temptation, or it becomes easy for the church to take on the role of provider and run a project and see the people we're serving as recipients. But I think we can do better than that. And I think that within our churches, we can model something different and recognize our dependence on one another and our need for one another. So I'm really encouraged by the fact that in our practical action and in our political engagement, that we might be shaped more and more by people in our communities who bring experiences which orient us towards ending poverty together.
Thank you, Will. Lots of great content there. I particularly liked the thinking around people in our communities coming to us as they do frequently, not as recipients of service, but as loved children of God. So thank you for that, Will. Finally, we hear from Alex, Reverend Alex Frost, who's a member of General Synod, who spoke during the debate. Alex, what's your experience of seeing, hearing and advocating for those in poverty in your role as a parish priest in Burnley?
Thank you, Bishop Lynn, and hi everybody. It's great to be with you this evening. My guess is that if you are watching or tuned into this webinar, then you've got an invested interest in the subject of poverty, and I don't want to patronize anybody by saying to you that it's really bad out there, but you will know that it's really bad out there. And there's a few things that I just want to pick up on. At the very beginning of the webinar, Bishop Lynn talked about the lived experience. I think it's so important for Christians to see poverty with our own eyes, because when we see it with our own eyes, we can perhaps feel it in our hearts, which helps us to speak about it to people in a position of power or somebody who can make a change. I'd also just like to quickly pick up on the point that Will raised, that removing a two-tier benefit cap will lift children out of poverty. I don't want to be devil's advocate, but I'm going to be. I don't believe that to be true. I don't think poverty is just about benefits being received by individual families. It's about much more than that. And the reality is, in the context of where I am and in Burnley, is that poverty is affecting people's lives on so many levels, not just financially, but mentally and physically, emotionally, spiritually. And that is where the church has been filling lots of gaps where people have fallen through the cracks. But I do want to very much applaud people who run food banks or shelters or pantries. I think it's exceptional work, but I also think we have perhaps reached a stage where we have to somehow try and move the challenge of poverty onwards. When we talk about 40 years since the document, and myself being a chap in his 50s who's lived in Burnley pretty much all of my life, who's never known the town not to have poverty within it. It's been there throughout my life, and working more closely with it over the last 7 or 8 years, I just feel it's gone worse because of the collapse within the structures that are there to support people. So the thresholds for social service support has collapsed. The threshold for police intervention has collapsed. I'm dealing with a 15-year-old boy presently who has got severe mental health issues because of the poverty that surrounds him. And we've been advised that a waiting list for an NH treatment at this time is 2 years. So, and that's just not acceptable, and that has to be challenged. So I want to encourage people to get out there and look maybe beyond the good work of a food bank and challenge why there's a food bank. You know, we should be brave enough and bold enough to say that the government people who are paid to care for our most vulnerable people should be ashamed that food banks and pantries need to exist, that night shelters need to be there. And I want to encourage you, because I think if you do speak truth to power through a lived and shared experience, it's very difficult for somebody in power to deny what you're saying. They almost have an obligation to respond. And I think if you can get a response from them, it starts a conversation, and then people start believing and trusting in what the church has to say. And I think we all have a role and a responsibility to be advocates for that, and to be brave and tenacious, and to speak truth to power. And when you speak truth to power, then I do believe that we can bring about change. But it does come at a cost, and it's not easy.
Thank you, Alex. So our speakers have given us plenty to think about there. And I'm going to now invite all three of them, Rob, Will and Alex, to join me for a 10-minute panel discussion where we're going to explore the themes together and delve perhaps a little deeper into some of the issues that we've had raised this evening. So firstly, a question thrown out to all three of you, really. Synod has spoken, but what difference does this make, particularly in view of the fact there's currently no particular budgetary or resource allocation for this work?
I'm very happy to say something on this. I made this point in my speech at General Synod that at some point we have to look beyond talking about it and speaking about it and being sorry about it. There is a point in time where we have to respond, and I think now is the time. I think there is a real opportunity for the church to do something really positive. Our narrative is not always of a positive nature, but I think this is that opportunity to show to people in power, and also to people who are oppressed and who are living in poverty, that we've got their back, that we can be a trusted group of Christians who care for them. We don't have or we shouldn't have a political agenda. I certainly don't have a political agenda. It comes from a place that's rooted in the gospel, to call out injustice, to serve the poor, stand up for the marginalised, and to love thy neighbour as thyself. I think we sometimes get bogged down in the complexities of theology. But regarding poverty, I think it's quite a simple response that's needed, to speak with honesty and integrity from the heart. And if we do that, we have a fighting chance.
Can I build on that? That's really helpful, Father Alex. Thank you for those reflections. I think for me, I'm really cheered, both in terms of Will's reflections about this being a pivotal changing moment in Synod, about lived experience, because I think listening much more profoundly to lived experience, that's what changes people's hearts and minds. The facts and figures are important, and it's good that we are data driven in what we do, but this is about real people and listening to those real stories. And I'm minded of Henri Nouwen's work, who reminds us, of course, that Jesus said, "Blessed are the poor, not blessed are those who care for the poor." So there's something here about listening deeply. There's also something here, I think, about seeing what's taking place with a number of diocesan strategies across the Church of England, where I think this is happening already. I think the amount of times that we're seeing an increase in dioceses who are making references to compassion ministries and making references to, Magnificat parishes or priority parishes, or there is a language which is emerging across the Church of England. Empower being another one of those kind of groups, as it were. There is a language which is emerging, which is actually beginning to take the cries of the poorest in our society more seriously, be it in ministry or be it in support or whatever it might be. The piece that we need to get right much better, it seems to me, is being able to build our confidence, because we're aware of our impact. I think we're quite good. We've talked about night shelters and food banks and all those sorts of things. We say that we do these things, but actually we don't have the matrix yet across the church, which helps to shape what the impact is. And I think if we were much more aware of what our impact was, it would build our sense of confidence about speaking more profoundly in the public square, which Will and Alex have both been describing this evening.
Thank you, Rob. Will, do you want to come in on that?
Sure. I mean, I think, to state the obvious, there's a lot going on in the Church of England at the moment, and so I think the fact that that the Synod took the time and made it, had a debate about this, and there was an opportunity for synod members to encourage each other, I think is a positive thing. And I think the opportunity to build on this is to think about how we apply this in our local context. What did we hear in the debate, and how did we think about what opportunities there are to develop what we're doing, to discern what God might be calling us to do in our communities, to have our eyes open for where there are opportunities, where there are gaps in support as well. And I think there's something about us being absolutely explicitly clear about the fact that there does not need to be poverty in our country, that we have enough in terms of resources and people to make sure that everybody has enough. We see in the early church that when people are generous and share, there are no needy people among the believers. And what does it look like for us as followers of Jesus Christ to find that our practice is transformed and our ways of living together are transformed, both in meeting need where we see it and calling on government and other actors to make decisions that help people have what they need to flourish.
Thank you. During the course of your presentations, each of you mentioned lived experience. So why is it important to hear the voices of those with lived experience, and how can we ensure that those voices, including disproportionately affected Black and minority ethnic people, shape policy and practice?
I think the thing about poverty, Bishop Lynn, is it's not unique to one group of people, one minority group, one ethnic group. Poverty, I said this again at Synod, poverty is poverty, and it affects everybody. And St Matthew's in Burnley, we are a real diverse community. We have people from Hong Kong, from Latvia, from America, from across the world, and they all have their own challenges as everybody else does. So I think it's recognizing that exists, and I think that lived experience is just such a powerful testimony. Jesus spoke in parables. He didn't speak in spreadsheets and statistics. He spoke from the heart and told people. He witnessed as we now witness to him. And I think when you hear those stories and how devastating they are, where you could actually argue we're not talking about poverty in some circumstances, we're talking about deprivation in some circumstances, where sometimes it is a matter of new shoes for the kids or food on the table. So and when you do bring that lived experience to people, I've been very fortunate that some high profile people have visited my parish. When they see it, they get it.
Mm-hmm.
And they feel emotional, upset, and I don't really want to make them upset, but it's a reality that can't be denied, and they have a yearning to support. And we've had an issue around ketamine in Burnley for a long period now, and I've been trying to raise that on the national stage, and that's brought support in from across the country. So there is hope there that when you tell real lived stories, people hear it, people are interested, people want to know how they can help and support you. So I think there's lots of reasons for doing it, whatever demographic it is from.
Thank you. That's helpful. So local action can inform national debate, it seems to me, is what you're saying, Alex. So is that something, Rob and Will, that you see across the country? Alex, I think we would agree, is exceptional in many ways. So is that something that is coming from churches across the country, that there's this sense that local action can inform national debate? And if so, how?
I think there's several things going through my mind. Thank you for those reflections, Alex. Earlier on, I'm mindful about whom are you listening to is the critical thing with this. I'm mindful that when I first became the chief executive of Church Urban Fund, I went to one of our places of welcome, and out of 20 people, six of them it was in a church hall. It was in Walsall, in a deprived part of the West Midlands. And out of six people out of those 20 told me that was the only time that week that they were going to meet with another human being. And that for me was a significant wake-up call. My diary is very full, and I would imagine a lot of people following this webinar's diaries are very full. I can't, with all legitimacy, create a program which is about tackling poverty because I don't know it. I'm a bishop. How many bishops know poverty at one level in terms of in terms of our own particular lived experience? So there's something here about who needs to give way, who needs to move out of the way. We have agency, we have power in the church. We have significant power in the church. We have significant wealth in the church. We have significant agency when it comes, as we've heard from Will, in terms of, through to the House of Lords and meetings with members of Parliament and all the rest of it. Sometimes it requires certain people to get out the way and provide space for others to speak. And you can only do that, I think, if you're rooted in the communities where we're rooted, which is why Alex's voice and the work that he does on social media and beyond is so critically important in terms of challenging those unjust structures of society. Mindful that this is one of the key marks of mission about transforming those unjust structures. We have, that there are the people, the voices which are there. Sometimes it requires those in positions of responsibility to take a step back and create and encourage that sense of agency so different voices can be heard.
Yeah, absolutely. In East London, my Episcopal area, we have community organising for growth. Community organising, I think, is a great vehicle by which grassroots views, grassroots momentum can build up and actually influence decision makers. So thank you for that, Rob. Can I direct this question to Will, please? So, Will, can you comment on the importance of and opportunities for collaboration and partnership with government, charities and communities? That feels like a question that I think you would have some insights for us.
Sure, thank you. I think it's essential. I think it's essential for practical reasons because I think we have a sense that addressing poverty is one of the challenges of our times, poverty in all of its forms. And so it's going to take a collective effort of people within the church and beyond the church, and for us to be working with with other people of faith and people of goodwill in our communities to both to keep doing the things that we're doing, but also to ask those difficult questions of why these needs exist. Why is it that we're running food banks and operating night shelters? So I think there's a necessity around partnership, but I think this goes back to what Bishop Rob was just saying. It's about making sure that in spaces where we have in the past made the mistake of dominating, that we step back and allow space for others with insights to assume that space and to raise the points that are specific in terms of their insights. At a national level, the bishops work very closely, particularly with other faith leaders as well, to try and raise issues that are of shared concern around poverty. The Church of England is on the steering group of the End Child Poverty Coalition, which brings together different charities to look at the policy challenges and the barriers that entrench poverty. And I think in terms of engagement with government, there are opportunities with this government in terms of the way that they intend and have started of engaging with civil society, that there is a commitment from government to respect the independence of civil society, to make it clear that it's not for churches and other civil society organizations to be filling gaps that the state can and should fill in terms of pulling those levers. But certainly there's more desire and appetite for that kind of partnership, and I think there are real opportunities there if we've got our eyes open to see them.
Wonderful, thank you. Now I'm going to go over now to Polly for our Q&A. It's time for you to put some of your questions to our speakers. So Polly, welcome. Thank you for joining us. So what are people online asking?
Right, so we've had some really great questions. Some of them have been answered, I think, in the conversation that you've just had, but I'm just going to begin by putting a couple to you, Bishop Lynn, for the panel. So a couple of questions about speaking truth to power. Somebody asked, Alex has said it's time for us to start asking questions like, why do we have food banks? We can often focus on the compassion elements of ministry, but how can we speak out about the issues of justice and why there is a need for these projects in the first place? And linked to that, another question, speaking truth to power is very significant, but how do we get those in power to actually make change that will make a difference on the ground rather than just responding with words, which don't really mean anything in practice?
Thank you, Polly. So yes, I'm minded of the words of, think, Archbishop Dom Helder Camara, who said, you know, when I feed the poor, they call me a saint. When I ask why they're poor, they call me a communist. So a little bit of a sense of that in those questions. So speaking truth to power, who wants to take question 1? It was Alex's comment that prompted it. Alex, do you want to start?
Yeah, I think this is not easy to do, but I think it's essential to do it. If I could just quickly talk about ketamine and just explore that for a moment. So I became aware of ketamine just by inquiring about one of our young mums in church who then told me that her son was using ketamine and he was dealing ketamine and he was being physically abusive to her, and drug runners were coming by the house. And I was intrigued by that, not so much by the ketamine, but by the response when I asked her who's looking after you or who's helping, and getting responses like social services don't want to know, social services saying this is a family support issue, and then getting a bit more intrigued and then wondering if anybody had been arrested or whether anybody was looking out for the boy who was possibly being exploited by drug dealers, and then the police saying this is a class B drug, we can't really, and then NHS, the gaps, and then asking into the NHS that GPs never really had heard of ketamine. But it was clearly an issue. And then as I reached out via my social media platform, hundreds of people then started sharing with me that ketamine was an issue. And I was thinking, crikey, I thought I'd seen it all in my context, but I discovered this world of ketamine. And then I thought, I have to speak truth to power. So I challenged people. I challenged the local police officers, chief superintendent, the member of parliament, the director of public health, and I wouldn't let go. I refused to let go until somebody gave me a satisfactory response. And then people then realized, as more people started coming forward, and then as more people started discovering that it wasn't just addiction, but it was lives being lost. We lost the 16-year-old boy in 3 foot of water in Burnley in a canal because he was off his face on ketamine. And then learning that somebody in Lincolnshire had a similar experience. And then the Vivian, who some people might be familiar with, the Vivian who died from ketamine issues. People started listening. People knew they had to make a response. And ultimately, it led to me being part of a government consultation on the reclassification of ketamine. You've got to be brave, you've got to be bold. But if you've got the evidence from the shared experience, from the real life story, it's very difficult for people in power to go, I'm sorry, I'm not available for comment, because I won't let go, because it matters. And I've got no political gain in it. It matters because that person is a vulnerable child or adult or elderly parent, whatever circumstance it is. They're as valuable as anybody else in our society. Nobody is more valuable than another. And when I stand by and have to watch potential go down the plug hole because people are not stepping in and not stepping up, we have an obligation in service and discipleship to Jesus to speak out. It's not easy, but you can do it, and it can happen, and it will if we kind of unite. I'm sorry, but I get emotional because it matters.
No. Amen, amen, brother, amen. Polly, can we have some more questions? Because I think I think Alex sort of covered both there, really.
Yeah. So a question about young people. Some of us will be aware of the report, The Quiet Revival, and conversation and discussion and debate about that. So a question about how can we engage younger people with this work in churches and in communities? And then maybe a connected question. There can be a disconnect between faith and works. So how can we equip people to articulate the why of being a Christian and also equip them to advocate for change in the local community and in partnership with the local community?
Okay, another two great questions. Thank you, Polly. So young people, how do we engage young people with this work? Rob, I heard earlier on today that you are about to launch a growing good for younger people. That obviously has a justice element. So is that a way that you see, how do you see that working with younger people? How do we draw them into this work?
Again, a lot of this is through lived experience. I mean, my experience of of being involved in all sorts of schools and things, and listening to all sorts of head teachers, and telling their examples of what life is like in the communities where they're serving. I think there's something about listening to that lived experience which then compels us to think, how do we draw in the lived experience of particularly of our young people? We've heard that the child limit is being removed, and that's going to take 500,000 children out of poverty. There's still going to be 4 million children in poverty. And so, the growing good resources, which actually fits your second question as well, are beautifully there, designed to help pull together that sort of sense of this being Christian mission, this being about discipleship, and this being about action. And there's something unique about the experience of young people who are living in that sort of sense of poverty, hearing what it's like from, parents' perspectives in terms of what it is that what life is like, particularly when there may be haves and have-nots in the schools and things like that. So for me, there's something about how do we listen to our schools? How do we listen to the young people who are within the schools? And then how do we kind of engage them in the importance of that work? And one of the things I've kind of loved about all sorts of schoolwork in ministry is that actually children are quite happy to kind of get out there, to go and ask the difficult questions, to meet with their MP or get the MP around the school to have a good look round, to bring in councils are actively involved in our schools anyway. And, as is, courageous advocacy in terms of the reflections which young people are having about becoming active citizens of their local communities. So I think schools are one of the critical ways in which we can do that alongside our youth clubs and, church youth clubs for those who've got them.
Wonderful, thank you. Alex, did you want to come in?
Yeah, I'd just like to add to what Robert said there is that in some areas of poverty, children not being in school is an issue. We've seen a huge increase in children dropping out of school and turning up at church, at lunch clubs and things like that. And I think there is an also opportunity to work with those disenfranchised children actually who have fallen away from the academic system by I think we become a place. It's an irony, really, in the Church of England, but we become a place of trust. That we become a place of sanctuary where they feel they're getting supported, where they're not being supported anywhere else, and that's a challenge because ideally you want the child in school, but it's also a reality check to say, well, okay, would I rather you in school? Yes, but can I offer you something here at church? Maybe serving tea at lunchtime with the approval of the parent or the carer. Yeah, okay. And they learn about church life and they learn about other people who are in fragile circumstances. They're a real gift to us, I think, that we should take advantage of in a correct and dignified and compassionate way.
Yeah, Yeah, to be part of a community is precious. Will, a final question around the disconnect between faith and works, and how do we inhabit the why of being a Christian in such a way that we can bridge those two divides?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I think that I'm thinking of that Bible verse in 1 John, we love because he first loved us. And I think how in all of this are we rooting our response to what we see around us in God's love for us, and our calling to share God's love with the people we encounter. I think I find it very hard to articulate a faith that isn't about then going out and responding in practice. And I think the opportunity for us as individuals to as we serve and encounter one another to be changed and to experience fresh insights into what God, who created us and who created the people that we encounter, that we experience fresh again what God is like, and experience new insights of that. So yeah, that would be my encouragement.
That's great, thank you. So we move on now to our takeaways. The debate at Synod emphasised the need for action, as we've just said, and not just words. So my final ask to each of you, our speakers, is to come up, please, with one suggestion for how we can each take action in response to what we've been discussing. So one suggestion in response. So can we start with Rob?
Thank you. I think my one suggestion from what we've heard today is to can I have two? I'm going to have two, if that's all right. There's something here about kind of recognizing to whom do we need to be in contact with. There's something about rolling your sleeves up. There's something about asking questions. So I think there's something here about praying deeply into what is our sense of curiosity in this? How is the Spirit opening our hearts to want to be much, much more aware of what it is that's going on around us, what poverty actually looks like, what it smells like, what it tastes like, in terms of that sort of sense of lived experience. So for a curious mind to then go and begin to ask some of those difficult questions. And the second one is try and get our heads around a little bit around the data. We've got the Joseph Rowntree Foundation stats. I mean, the Church Urban Fund has the deprivation data for every parish across the Church of England. Look at the lookup tool, see what the data is, and then know what you're dealing with, because it may be that your part of the community that you're in actually doesn't have much of a sort of sense of poverty within it, and sometimes because of the company or the people that we mix with, it may be that we're missing something that's around us. So how does the data actually inform us that sense of curiosity, and then to take that forward, as we've heard?
That's great. Thank you, Rob. So, Will.
Thanks. I think the thing that I'm going to take away, and I'd encourage others to take away, is to think, as we're involved in projects through our church and living in community with one another, as we spot the issues that those projects and that service is designed to meet, to think and talk to the people around us about why those needs exist in the first place, and to think about what would need to change in order for us to be able to offer something different and pastoral as part of that, rather than meeting emergency need, which is so often at the moment.
Thank you. And last but by no means least, Father Alex.
I would have a couple, if that's all right. I think first and foremost, pray. I think it's amazing what prayer does and how it can surprise you. That it might not produce something at the exact moment you expect it to do, but I've prayed enough to trust in prayer as a response to poverty. But I'd also ask you to try something. I've just noticed my dog collar lying in front of me, and I just want you to imagine that this is the back of the social injustice curve, or this is where poverty. This is the poverty curve, and where your church is in this curve. might be here in terms of doing food banks and wonderful things to serve the community, but where is it in terms of speaking out into the community or into power? And maybe highlight maybe just one key area. It might be an issue of fly tipping, it might be an issue of drug dealing, it might be an issue of criminality, and just see, maybe pick one and have a go and see how far you can go with that, who you can speak to. Can you speak to your bishop, make him aware or her aware? Can you speak to your local member of parliament, your county councillors, your local media? Have you got an online social media presence where people will notice you? And just to encourage you to, Cuff have produced an interview with the Archbishop of Canterbury, which is a really good interview. And it's a really good interview because it's not too complex. I work in a certain stratosphere in my brain. It's full of simple, pragmatic ideas. Do something, say something, try something. And if it goes wrong, it doesn't matter. It matters if you don't try. So do please try, and please be encouraged. And thank you if you are a church who is dealing directly with issues of poverty. I know it's difficult, and I'm grateful for what you do. Thank you.
Bless you, Alex. Thank you. So we've come to the end of our session for this evening. Cuff will be sharing the recording of the webinar plus some really useful links and ideas for action. So please do look out for an email next week. A final thank you to Rob, to Will and to Alex. What rich stuff they've shared for us there. Great ideas, both encouragement and challenge, I think was in their words to us this evening. And thank you each of you for coming. Thank you for your active participation in the questions. Thank you, as Alex said, for all that you are doing to support those experiencing poverty in our communities across the country. So let's close in a short time of prayer. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we do lift to you all that we have shared, all that we have heard this evening. We thank you for everyone across the church who is working to alleviate the hardship of those experiencing poverty. We pray to be courageous advocates. We thank you that we are seen as places of trust and of sanctuary. But do help us to ask the difficult questions. Help us to sense how the Spirit is moving through your church and through your communities. And Lord, as we leave this session now, we pray that you would stir in each one of us the action that you would have us take. For we each have agency to act, to challenge poverty. Direct us, Lord, guide us, inspire us, and bless each of us in our work and in our ministry. In Jesus' name, amen.